Hi, welcome back. It's time for a ritual. At the start of every semester, when I get ready to teach my class, I invite people to come along for the ride, and this semester is going to be no different. You'd think after 36 years of teaching I'd be bored and jaded, but I'm not. I won't describe my classes in exhaustive detail, but I'll give you the choices you have if you decide to take one of my classes. Before I do that, though, I have to tell you that this semester is going to be special. Why? Because I've spent the last year and a half teaching my classes from my home. I've been teaching it from my office, and over the last year and a half, I've accumulated technology that has allowed me to deliver my classes. Now, I thank God every day for Zoom and Teams and Blue Jeans and Skype because they've allowed me to reach out to my students even though we've all been trapped at home. Just to give you a sense of the technology that's helped me on this journey, you can see a picture of my desktop. You can see my MacBook Pro up front. You see my 27-inch display when I want to see the Zoom gallery of everybody in my class. You can see my iPad in sidecar mode, which basically means it becomes another display. You can see my iPhone. And then you can see my audio and video add-ons. For the audio, I have a microphone, a lavalier mic, because I've discovered that it's much easier and much less intrusive than having a physical mic, so it's clipped on. And I have cameras, one camera built into my computer and one extra camera just in case I want to stand up. Incidentally, the reason I bring that up is I prefer teaching standing up. I find it odd, unusual, maybe it's just me, to sit down and teach a class. So I've got the standing desk that I can bring up. Now, you might be wondering why I'm listing off all of the things I have in my desktop in such excruciating detail. It's because I've been asked by people who actually teach from home whether there's something they can do to improve their setting, and maybe this will help you. But hopefully this part of my teaching life is coming to a close and I can be back in my classroom in the spring. But as I get ready to go back into the classroom, I have to tell you the things I've learned while intensively teaching online that I hope I can take into my regular teaching. First, and this should be scary for all of us who are teachers, it was amazing it's actually pretty scary to see how close you could get to a classroom online. I think of my Zoom classes, how I could look at people, call on them, have a discussion going. And as I did that, I said, you know what, this is bad news if you're a teacher because disruption is coming to the classroom sooner than we think. So if you're a teacher, then it's time we all started thinking about what we do in a classroom that makes it unique, that makes it special, that makes people want to come into a physical classroom. Second, there are things I've learned that are easier taught online than in a physical classroom. As an example, March of 2020, I valued Boeing, and usually I don't open Excel spreadsheets in classrooms because it's a recipe for disaster. To open a spreadsheet, you lose people's attention. But I discovered teaching, going through a valuation of a spreadsheet online is much more engaging. People are actually involved. And third, and this is just me, much as I enjoyed teaching online, I desperately miss being in a classroom, looking out across faces, some bored, some sleeping, doesn't matter, actually seeing people. Now, every semester when I start my class, I start with an objective. I said, this semester I'm going to teach the best class I've ever taught. And I'm going to do the same thing again this semester. I know I'm not going to deliver a perfect class. There's always something that I can do better. Hey, but there's no harm trying, right? So let me start off by describing what I teach so that you can make your choices on whether you want to go along for the ride. Now, I'll start with the confession. I'm not a specialist. I'm a dabbler. I dabble in lots of different things, which means that over my lifetime, I've taught a lot of very different classes in finance, ranging from banking to corporate finance to valuation to trading. And the core of my teaching happens in the classroom. I've been teaching at Stern now for most of my 36 years to both MBAs and undergraduates. I teach the MBAs in two different classes, a corporate finance class, usually to the first year MBAs, an elective, and valuation to the second year MBAs, again an elective. For some reason, people don't seem to get enough torture in that first year and come back for the second year. For the undergraduates, I teach one class. So usually alternate between corporate finance and valuation. For the last 3 years, it's been valuation, and mostly juniors take that class. Now, over the last decade, perhaps 15 years, I've also developed online versions of these classes. You're saying, what do you mean online? If you can track the classes that you teach in the classroom. My classroom classes are long, they're 80 minutes. My online variants are only 15 minutes. They're designed for people who don't have the time to invest in long classes and essentially deliver about 80-90% of the content. And so if you want to see those online variants, they're on my website. So I'm going to talk about what I teach, and essentially you can make your choices. Now, when people walk into my corporate finance and valuation classes, I expect them to have some exposure and understanding of three areas. The first is accounting. The second is the basics of finance, time value of money, risk, interest rates, some macro basics, and the basics of statistics. So you know what a standard deviation is, a correlation, or even be able to read a regression. Now, I've learned over time that I could not assume that even if people had taken these classes, that they walked in with this understanding, because things sometimes don't stick. So being a control freak, I've created my own versions of these classes that I'll briefly describe. But I'll tell you, if you're a purist on any of these disciplines, you're going to blanch at my class here and say, that doesn't make sense, you're leaving out stuff. And you're going to find my description sloppy, but you be the judge. So the first of my pre-game, I call these pre-game classes, because these are classes that I hope people will take before they come into my class, is accounting. I say some mean things about accountants, but the reality is much of the raw material we use in finance comes from financial statements. So my accounting class is less about debit and credit and more about reading financial statements. And over a series of 12 or 13 sessions, I take you through my version of accounting, essentially using accounting statements for finance. Now, once you get through the accounting, I strongly suggest, if your finance is shaky, that you take a foundations class. What do I cover? Time value of money. It's amazing how that first class most of us get in finance ends up becoming the bedrock on which everything else gets built. It's time value of money. You have to talk about cash flows, and of course you have to talk about discount rates. To talk about discount rates, you got to talk about risk. And in the foundations class, I take you through the process of how we think about risk, flawed or otherwise, in finance. And I close the class off with three macro variables that we run into over and over again when we do financial analysis. The first is inflation, the second is interest rates, and the third is exchange rates. So that's the second pre-game class. The third pre-game class is my statistics class. Again, I teach this class as somebody who uses statistics. I'm not a statistics PhD. I'm a novice in statistics, but this class is taught from the perspective of somebody who's found statistics to be incredibly useful. And it's incredibly useful for a simple reason. We live in a world where we're surrounded by data. We're drowning in data. Our complaint should no longer be that we don't have enough data. It should be that we have too much data. And statistics is tailor-made to deal with that problem. We live in an age of big data, and I take you through the basics of statistics, from descriptive statistics like the average and the standard deviation, to statistics that look at relationships, correlations, covariances, to reading regressions, and even the basics of running a Monte Carlo simulation. Again, tools that we will draw on in our corporate finance, valuation, and investment philosophy classes. So if you're strong on accounting, finance, basic finance and statistics, you can skip these classes or you can take them. So let's move on to the actual game, which is the classes I actually teach. Now, I teach three classes: corporate finance, valuation, and investment philosophy. And they're like my children. You ask me, which is your favorite class? I don't like to pick favorites because the other two will pipe up. But if I had to make a pick on one class that I think everybody should take, it's corporate finance. And you're saying, why do I need to learn corporate finance? Because corporate finance is not something bankers and consultants practice. It's the first financial principles that govern how you run a business. Let me repeat that again. Corporate finance looks at the first financial principles on how to run a business. Those principles drive how you make investments, basically what kind of projects you take, what you invest in, how you fund those investments, how much debt and equity you use, what kind of debt, And how much of the cash you generate as a business goes back to the owners. The public companies, this is the dividend decision, the investment decision, the financing decision, the dividend decision. That's basically what this entire class is about. And it's an applied class, which means everything I do in the class, I apply on real companies in real time, because I want to give you the tools to be able to go out there, pick a company, small or large, private or public, US, European, emerging market, and take it through the process. So that's my core class. I will be teaching it to the Stern MBA starting on January 31st, 2022, God willing, in a classroom. We will meet every Monday and Wednesday from 10:30 to 11:50. Obviously, if you're a Stern MBA, you're welcome to register in the class. But if you're not, obviously you can't walk in and sit in the classroom. But you can unofficially follow along. By doing what? All of these classes will be recorded. And later in the day, late Monday, late Wednesday, you should see the class show up. You can watch the entire 80-minute session with the slides and the added material that the people in the class have. You can even take the quizzes and the exams. The good news is it won't cost you anything to take the class. The bad news is don't expect credit or certification. But you can effectively take the class in absentia. Now, if you're time constrained, spending 80 minutes every Monday and Wednesday watching a class might be out of your reach, but I have the online version, 15-minute sessions, which you can take the class, that you can get on my website by going into the online classes. Now, you might say, look, I'm time constrained, but I also want some certification because I want to put in my resume, use it to get a job. Hey, fair enough. But if certification is your end game, I can't offer certification. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, but NYU does. You can take a variant of my online class. The content is pretty much the same through NYU. It comes with quizzes, exams, and actually we meet once every 2 weeks to do an actual interaction so you and I can chat. NYU will give you a certificate if you get through the class and you meet the requirements. The downside is NYU is not a charitable institution. It definitely is, and it'll make you pay a price. So it's your choice. You can either take the regular MBA class and follow along for 15 weeks. You can take the time-constrained online version, or you can take the NYU certification class. Which brings me to my second class, which is valuation. Start of the class, I state my ambition, and it's big. By the end of this class, I say, look, I want you to be able to value or price just about anything. You're saying, what do you mean anything? Stocks, bonds, businesses, physical assets, real estate, even cryptos. So in this class, we cover pretty much everything. We go through traditional intrinsic valuation, where we talk about cash flows, growth, and risk, and we look at not just established companies, not just public companies, but startups and private businesses, small, large, US, emerging market, basically across the spectrum. We then draw a line and talk about pricing assets, how you price things like cryptos or physical assets or collectibles. And then we throw in a little bit of optionality. What do you do about valuing a platform that a company has with lots of users? Valuation, pricing, options. And through all of this, there are three broad themes I come back to over and over again. The first is that valuation is a craft. You learn it by doing it, not by talking about it, reading about it, writing about it, but by doing it. So we cover the range of companies and the range of assets precisely for that reason. The second is value and price are not the same thing. Valuing an asset and pricing an asset, you go through different processes, different techniques, and you can come up with different numbers. Sounds mysterious, but sit in the class to find out why value and price are different. And finally, while a valuation might look like it's all driven by numbers, a good valuation is a bridge between stories and numbers. I make a big deal about narrative tying numbers together, and how you put together a thought through narrative for the company. And as with the corporate finance class, you have choices. You can either take one of my classes, and I'm actually teaching two versions of the valuation class. One to MBAs and one to the undergraduates. They both meet on one Monday and Wednesday. The undergraduate class is a little shorter. It's 75 minutes instead of 80 minutes, but there's 2 extra sessions. But the classes are identical. So don't torture yourself by watching both classes, but you're welcome, again, to take the classes unofficially, watch the recorded sessions, and kind of hang in there through the end. The alternative, if you have time constrained or budget constrained is you can either take the free online version that I have on my website and not get certification, or you can go through NYU, pay the price and get the certification. So again, as with corporate finance, 3 choices. Which brings me to my third and final class. This is incidentally a class that I've never actually taught in, in a classroom at Stern. But I'll give you the origins of this class. About 20 plus years ago, I was asked to manage a seminar class. I don't know why I agreed to do it, but it was a 16-session seminar class. And really, I didn't have to teach. I just had to manage the class. And what happened every session is a successful investor or trader would come in and talk to the MBAs in the class about, what they did, why it worked, and how they made money. And I remember in New York, you're going to be drawing on a wide spectrum of successful investors. So we had a range of people come in. I think in week 1, we had a technical analyst who used only charts, Ralph Acampora, who was a legendary name in technical analysis, talk about why he did, what he thought about markets, and why he thought he was successful. And then week 2, we had Michael Price, classic value investor. Week 3, we had a growth investor. Week 4, we had a venture capitalist. And each week you go through this cycle of, hey, that works. I want to be like him or her. And as I watch students go through this 16-week period, getting pulled from one end to the other, I thought about what I thought was a contradiction I had to explain, which is these people who came in as successful investors or traders were very different in their makeup and what they thought about markets, how they made money, and they were all successful. And I said, well, that must mean there can't be one pathway to success. There cannot be one great investment philosophy. Because the one thing they all shared was each had thought through their way of investing or trading. Each had an investment philosophy, even though they were different. So I actually wrote a book on investment philosophies, talking about the range of philosophies. And here's what I did with each philosophy. I described what the philosophy was. I looked at what ingredients you needed to succeed with that philosophy, and then I asked the question, is that for you? And that's what this class does. It goes through every conceivable way of making money, from charting to, value investing, to growth investing, to trading on information, to arbitrage, to market timing. And essentially with each one, I try to take as agnostic a look as possible at the philosophy and talk about what is it that you need to make that philosophy work. Essentially, the end game for this class is not to find the best investment philosophy, because I don't think there's one, but to find the best investment philosophy for you. So the end game of this class is for people to look inward, to think about what they bring to the game and which of these philosophies best fit. So if you want to take this class, there are 2 ways you can take it. One is I have an online version of this class I've created, which is free, and you can take it. It's 36 sessions where I take you on a journey through every investment philosophy. The other is if you want certification, there's an NYU version of this class you can take. And again, for a price, you can take the class and get certified. So at this stage, you're probably saying, what the heck do I do? You got these 3 pre-game classes, you got 3 regular classes. Which one should I take? I don't mean to be intrusive, but if you really want some guidance, I put together a flowchart you can go through. So the top half is pretty self-explanatory, which is if you're comfortable with accounting, statistics, or the basics of finance, you can skip those pre-game classes. If you're interested in exploring finance further, and you might not, you might stop right there. But if you are, then I ask you what area you're most interested in. Are you interested in the principles of running a business, which is what you would use if you're an entrepreneur, you're working in corporate finance, you're a consultant, you want to run a business, then take the corporate finance class and just stop. If you're interested in valuation, then I think it makes good sense to start with the corporate finance class, because if you don't know how to run a business, I don't see how you can actually value a business. So I think it's good to take corporate finance first and then valuation. But if you're interested in just investing and you don't care about valuation, remember there are investment philosophies that don't require that you know the insides of valuation. You can go directly to investment philosophies. But if you have the time, I'd again strongly suggest taking a valuation class as an intermediate step. So that's, I hope that helps you, but that's my flow chart. So as you look at these choices, I'll make a couple of confessions, and please don't take these the wrong way. Whenever I make these offers for people to take my class, I get at least I won't put a number on it, but quite a few emails asking me, well, what's your track record been? Can you show me what your portfolio has made? And I'm going to respectfully refuse to answer those emails in case you're thinking about sending me those, for two reasons. First is, let's say my track record. Let's say I have a terrible track record. Now, does that mean that I can't talk about and teach valuation? Or conversely, if I have a great track record, how do you know I just didn't get lucky? You know how difficult it is to separate skill from luck? Just because somebody's made a lot of money doesn't mean that they know everything about markets or what they say has any weight. And just because somebody has failed. So this might sound like I'm being evasive, but I don't think my track record is relevant in this. Second is, if I were asking for the opportunity to manage your money, if I were a portfolio manager, you're completely within your rights to demand to know what my track record is. But that's not what I'm offering. Now, if this absence of being able to look into my portfolio is a deal breaker for you, then trust me, my classes are not for you. I don't teach these classes with the end game of, if you take these classes, you're going to make money. There are other people out there who will make that offer, and I think you should try them out. I'm not saying they know what they're saying or know what they're talking about, or they don't. That's not for me to judge. But, these might not be the classes you're looking for. No, that's a kind of joke. These are not the droids you were looking for, in case you're a Star Wars fan. But the bottom line is, if you are interested, as I said, you got free versions of each of the classes. If you want certification, there's a version that gives you the certification. But whatever you choose to do, maybe it's only a part of a class, I hope you find it useful. And I thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you in one of my classes. Take care.